media? That's also a really good question. And I'll address that one first. In this case, no, they didn't. The administrators I worked with at ECU didn't have any understanding of journalistic or First Amendment issues. In fact, they reorganized 2 years ago and put student media under marketing. So I think that sort of tells you what you need to know about that. They were completely unprepared for the firestorm they were swept up in the day after my firing. They had no press release prepared, no statements, no defense when they were bombarded with questions by local and state media and advocacy organizations. But I don't want to give the impression that that's always the case. I've worked with student newspapers in just about every structure possible. As part of student affairs, as part of an academic department, and in a not-for-profit 501c3. They all have their pluses and minuses. In my experience in the academic department, the newspapers felt like an exclusive enclave for journalism majors. While the students were supported by faculty and administrators who understood the role of journalism mostly, there was little academic diversity on the staff, and the content reflected it. In the 501c3, in my opinion, the purpose of the student newspaper got turned on its head. Generating revenue and making the most money possible, which primarily benefited the professional staff, had become more important than maintaining a learning lab for students, who were minimized and got no advising at all. Professionals did a great deal of the work, in fact, in that environment, and the paper was always referred to as the campus newspaper, never as a student newspaper. In student affairs, there's the obvious danger of administrators who don't know the First Amendment from a hole in the ground. My experience at the University of Alabama showed me that there are student affairs administrators who do understand the role of the student newspaper and other student-run media. At Alabama, the student affairs administrators didn't always like what the paper published, but knew better than to retaliate against the students or the advisors. In student affairs, all of the student media are eligible for student fees, which is a nice perk. And because it's not tied to one academic department, the student media, most importantly the newspaper, tend to draw students from every academic discipline. At Alabama, we had newspaper editors who were journalism majors, and history majors, and math majors, and just about any major you could think of. This was helpful, covering things journalists don't always have a natural connection to, like nursing and engineering and other programs like that. And it allows students from those and other majors to have a rewarding extracurricular experience. The second issue that I brought up, should I have told the students not to run the photos? My philosophy is student newspapers can do things that professional newspapers can't, because of the audience primarily. That's an important lesson for future media practitioners. The type of publication you work for and your audience dictate what's acceptable. Mostly I advise students they can push the envelope a little bit, but I don't tell them specifically what to do and what not to do. As an advisor, my role is to give the students all the resources they need, feedback, technology, training, criticism, and then allow them to make their decisions. Train them and trust them as the admonition goes. Finally, did the students make a good editorial decision? Well, we can debate that until the cows come home. Maybe, maybe not. There are a lot of factors involved, and a lot of it depends on the perception or the perspective that you bring to the discussion. The streaker photos were not, as you can see, as administrators at ECU tried to argue at first, obscenity. To be obscene, you know all the criteria, there can't be any journalistic merit. And obviously this was an event that happened on campus in front of about 40,000 people and was republished in a newspaper that prints 9,000. Is it appropriate to run a naked guy on the front page? The students argued with the administrators they were giving the newspaper's audience access to unedited and factual photos of the streaking incident. The paper's editor said, while the photos may be seen as offensive to some, the photos were not meant to be seen as sexually suggestive or insulting, but instead an accurate account of Saturday's events. And that's a direct quote from the editor. A group of administrators, almost all of whom were people involved in university marketing, met with the students and argued professional newspapers would run that picture. And that's one standard. There are others. For example, I was asked by administrators to find out how other student newspapers had dealt with similar stories and photos, and here's what I found out. On November 4th of last year, so around the same time, many naked students were pictured on the front of the Rice Thresher at Rice University, and a picture of naked students ran in last year's newspaper and was reprinted in the yearbook. In both instances, the photos were taken during a recurring streaking event. And let's see if I can make that show up. There we go. Yeah, you can see. That's big enough to see what you need to see. On November 8th, so also within the same day actually, that the streaker photo ran in East Carolina. The Shorthorn at the University of Texas at Arlington ran on the front page a 5-column photo of a full-figured naked woman lying across a dining room table eating an apple to illustrate a story about the media's portrayal of body image. Also on November 8th, that was a good day for nakedness in student newspapers. The Pendulum at Elon University ran a story in 3 photos about residents live forcing a student to remove 2 posters from her dorm wall. Both of the posters were of 2 women kissing. In one poster, the 2 women were naked. 2 photos of that poster ran with the story. So within the same week, there had been 3 incidents, just like or similar to ours, not exactly the same. I also learned about some others. At Oklahoma State University, at the Daily Colloquium, the paper regularly photographed streakers during the unofficial OSU Streakers Night. Photos of streakers are not unprecedented here, the advisor told. I don't have a picture of that, sorry. Sorry to disappoint you. The Daily Toriador at Texas Tech University, several years ago, the paper ran a front page, uncensored photo of a student streaking through the center of campus. The Pitt News at the University of Pittsburgh. The cover of the sex edition of the newspaper 2 years ago featured a shot of about 20 students in various states of undress, artfully posed in a tight group, touching each other. From the advisor, it filled the front and back pages. The guy who designed it and supervised the photo shoot graduated in 2010 and got hired a year later by the New York Times. We were very proud of him. So, and you can see it. The Red and Black, the University of Georgia, their coverage of the Playboys Girls of the SEC edition included a photo and a story of the photo shoot and ran on page 1. The Seahawk at UNC Wilmington, in March of 2009, the newspaper printed 4 photographs of friendly nude girls under the age of 18. I'm not going to put those up there, but you can look if you want. The photos were part of a large set that had been pulled from a campus exhibit of Frank Cordell's Century Project, which you can go online and see. The student newspaper covered the debate over the photos for a period of months. One of the 4 photos ran on the front page with a band across the center of the photo reading Censor, S-C-E-N-S-O-R, plus a clear warning that the issue contained nude photographs removed from the exhibit. The newspaper didn't republish the photos online. Of course, all this doesn't mean it's okay to publish nudity in all student newspapers. As we all know, community standards come into play. If I advised at a very conservative religious institution, certainly I would advise the students differently than I did at a public university in which no administrators and very few readers had ever complained about anything the paper had published in the 3.5 years I had been there. Okay, rather than keep talking about the student's decision until the cows do come home, I'll move on to another issue, and that's the issue of public relations. For those of you who teach or practice PR, there's an interesting case study there. As I mentioned, ECU was blindsided by the strong negative reactions to my firing. When a person I'd never met or talked to wrote a letter to the local paper criticizing ECU for firing me, I felt like I'd won the PR war. The university got pummeled from all sides, including sides I wasn't even on. But that changed on a dime when the university issued a media advisory stating it would allow me to sign a waiver to release my personnel records to the public to help clear up the reason for my firing, which they said was not a First Amendment issue. They never approached me with this and went straight to the news media with it. And of course, I hadn't even seen the contents of this file that they were asking me to release to the public. So of course I said no. But from that moment on, the dynamics of the PR battle changed.